user group that you're attending, or you are already attending a couple of them, let us know, and we will be shortly starting in a couple of minutes.
Yeah. Cool. I see we started recording already. Just a quick, I guess, intro before we get started, just on the tool for people who might be new to it. I see most of you have already found the chat. Perfect. So that's where you can chat, as the name suggests. There is also a separate Q&A button at the bottom. So if you have specific questions, feel free to drop them there. If you drop them in the chat, we'll find them too. No big deal. But if you want to stay organized, dropping them in the Q&A will help. We have Angela from our side as well in the chats. There she is, introducing herself there. She'll help moderate, gather the questions throughout so that we can have some time at the end as well to address these. So yeah, feel free to drop thoughts, input, questions throughout. We want to make sure we have time to address them, and whatever we can't address during today's call, we can always pick up afterwards. We're happy to follow up. I see Angela is also sharing some of the LinkedIn profiles. I think, Angela, if you share ours as well, that'd be a great way for everyone to connect, stay in touch, and pick up some of these questions that maybe we don't get to today afterwards. So yeah, with all that said, Stjepan, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, so hi everyone. So let's get started. We are already 2 minutes in. We want to make sure that we have plenty of time for Q&A. So as Martin said, put your questions during the presentation in the chat, in the Q&A section. If you want to chat and connect, there's links there. So for the ones that are first time joining us, first of all, welcome. And we'll try to keep some variety in topics going here in this nonprofit hub. We also invite you to share what topics you would like us to cover more in the future. You can do that during this webinar, or you can share that in via LinkedIn to me and Martin or Angela. We will be active in different channels moving forward, like HubSpot community for nonprofits. If you are not already a member, I encourage you to join, and channels like Reddit. In today's session, we want to focus more on segmentation and smart outreach side of HubSpot. So that's why we created the smart list tags and the lifecycle stages, segmenting for action webinar. A lot of this, if not all, will be applicable to a broader user journey as well. So let's kick the next slide, why we started the nonprofit hub. So this is the official HubSpot user group focused on nonprofits and political organization. We call it the nonprofit hub because you are on the front lines of change, and HubSpot is here to help you scale that impact. You can expect these sessions to be highly tactical. We will not just be showing features and tools that HubSpot has, because there are so many. There's so many new every other week. We will be applying them. So today we will leave you with concrete examples of how to segment and activate your supporter base in smart, faster ways. In this session, we will plan to go over a couple of features tools that HubSpot offers at the core tier, like starter, but also at the pro tier, and how you should think about them at the end. That Martin will demo the whole thing. The goal here is to give a general guide with tactical examples and spark some ideas through the use through what we'll be talking. For a more in-depth tactical guide, we'll share resource at the end, so please stay at the end, that you can dive into to build your specific property types, automation, nurture triggers, and much more. This way, we hope everyone will get something from today's session, regardless of where you are in your HubSpot knowledge. So join a mission-driving community of HubSpot users, join the nonprofit hub, share it on your socials, and let's make this HubSpot user group work for everybody that's in the nonprofit space. So let me introduce myself before we start with the slides. So my name is Stjepan. You probably met me on your LinkedIn feeds or in HubSpot community, probably in a nonprofit community. I will also be attending the Inbound this year in San Francisco, and I'm an inbound correspondent again for this year. So we can also connect there. So let me know if you're coming, put it in the chat pane. And You can read more here about me, but what I'm most proud of is that I'm a part of an agency that's doing uh, the nonprofit tech stack. We are improving our clients. We are uh, putting their tech stack that's outdated into one tool. And I also brought Giving Tuesday to Croatia to support mission-driven organizations globally. So I've been in that space for more than 10 years. My goal here is to give you tools you can actually use with every new speaker. In the next couple of hugs, I will do just that. So Martin, you're also going to inbound, but I think you will be also in the US in a couple of weeks.
Hey guys. Yeah, so I'm Martin. Don't bother trying to pronounce the last name. I think that's something Stjepan and I have in common. At Digital Reach, I'm working exclusively on marketing operations projects, both for nonprofits and for profits. So it's all about segmenting data, using that data, and basically making your CRM work for you. That's what I'm working on with clients on a day-to-day basis. Yeah, so, like Stjepan mentioned, so it will be at several events in the future as well. We have obviously Inbound coming up in September. I'll also be in Netroots for people who might be there early August in New Orleans. So that's in a few weeks. Looking forward to that. Yeah, and so with that, I would say let's kick off our presentation and talk about segmentation for nonprofits and how we go about it.
Great, excellent. So let's try to understand why segmentation matters. So let's be real. Blasting emails to everyone in your database hurts engagement. Segmentation is what fixes that by making every message more relevant. Think of it this way. Would you talk to your first time donor the same way as a long time volunteer? Probably not. So when you segment based on behavior, interests, role, your communication becomes personal, timely, and effective. And that's what we are trying to unlock today. We also are unlocking how to save time in this time where like budgets are being cut. So we promise that these tactics will help tailor asks, donor, volunteer, and advocate, improve open and click rates by targeting on interests and actions, turn messy spreadsheets, databases into organized, action-ready CRM lists. Our big promise is that you will be able to better communicate with your constituents, volunteers, activists, donors, and anybody that's involved in your nonprofit, and having your CRM being a helpful tool. So, Martin, what are we covering today?
Yeah. So I think, so as Stefan mentioned, the why is very important there. Why do we want to segment in the first place? Is so we can contact people and reach out and talk to people in a way that's relevant for them. Now, how we go about segmenting people in our CRM, in our organization, there's various ways to do that. And essentially what we'll focus on today are four, I would say, key aspects to effective segmentation, starting off with properties, custom properties, smart properties, but these are essentially your building blocks that we all know in HubSpot. We'll go through the lifecycle stages as well, how you'd use that, and essentially to show the chronological flow and journey of your supporters, of your donors, etc. The use of lists and tags and the differences there, with the idea being at the end we'll go through a demo of it all, basically combining all these aspects of segmentation and showing why they all matter and how they can all help to accomplish that end goal of talking to your contacts, your supporters, your donors in a way that's relevant for them, using all of these different segmentation techniques. So we'll cover all four, and then in the demo, essentially show how they all work together to reach that goal. Kicking then things off with, I think the most used one, and essentially the building block of it all is properties, custom properties.
Yeah, exactly. So we will start defining what are custom properties. You know, HubSpot has native ones, but before we jump into that, I want you to think that everything in HubSpot runs on properties. And these are the data points you use to track who people are, who the humans in your CRM are, and what they have done in interacting with you. So start with essentials. What is their role? What is their age, region? capacity. I would say do not overcomplicate it. Your goal is to collect the information you need to personalize outreach and drive next steps. So properties are basically building blocks of your every CRM strategy. It will allow you to track specific relevant data beyond the native fields, default fields. And this needs to be tailored to capture unique information for your organization. So some of the things that I would like you to think about coming off from this webinar is that when you are creating a custom property, ask yourself, can this be used in a workflow or reporting needs? And if that is an answer no, then probably you need to think about, oh, maybe there's a native property already being built, or maybe we don't need this property in our CRM that will mess our data. And then, Martin, what are some benefits for nonprofits and use cases you see when you're consulting nonprofits and political organizations?
Yeah. So talking through some of the use cases. So obviously every organization has different data metrics that are important for them, and properties are essentially there to reflect that. So using custom properties is almost a must, I would say, if you want your CRM to truly reflect your organization. So the first and foremost, setting up these custom properties is a priority. What are your key metrics? Are these calculated properties, right? When we're talking about donation amounts, average donations amounts, automated properties that would, for example, reflect the last campaign someone may have donated to, or the last event someone may have attended, right? That's really your starting point of setting up these custom properties to reflect the key metrics that are relevant for your organization. Another thing about properties, perhaps underutilized, right, is having properties do the work for you and helping you generate deeper insights, right? This is where one property can aggregate information from other properties to pull that together. So if we're talking, for example, about an average donation amount, we could take all individual donations amount, calculate a property that takes this all, summarizes this on a contact level. So we'll go through some examples later as well, but that general thought pattern of what are my individual metrics that I need and want to collect? Let's get those set up, my custom properties. And then what aggregated data can I already start collecting on contact level using some of these calculated and automated properties as well. The last thing I would call out there as well when it comes to the use of properties is unifying your CRM, if that's the right term for it, but essentially making use of synced properties, right? This is really the thought of where should the data live. A lot of the information we collect, almost by default, we think of collecting this on a contact level, right? But what we can do in HubSpot is sync this data across multiple objects. So a contact can be associated to a deal, a donation deal, or a household object, or a company, right? And having that data move around through the use of synced properties that in real time will update as soon as the value changes on the contact level. And that's an important use case as well. So this is where we'll go through that example shortly. A typical use case that we see quite often is if we are creating a household object which consists of multiple people having multiple donations, having all of that data not only being stored on a contact level, but then being synced over to the household object, where we have then an aggregated view of, hey, within this household, we have 2 first-time donors, 3 recurring donors, and an average donation amount of this, and their topics of interest seem to be X, Y, Z. That's really, taking all that into consideration, that's really how you'd want to look at setting up your properties, of collecting the data points that you need, aggregating that using calculated and automated properties, and then unifying that through synced properties across different objects in your CRM. As we say that, and as we will go through examples, one thing that becomes usually quite clear quite often is this can get messy very fast, and that's something that we see very often, right? Where you go into a CRM, everyone can create properties left and right. Things can become very unorganized very quick. And so a general tip, and really just doing this from the get-go will save you a lot of time, is using structured field values as much as you can. So as much as open text fields are useful in that you don't have to, you can collect a broad how would you say that? You can collect any information that you'd want from someone through an open text field. Reporting on this or syncing this information across objects becomes very messy. So whenever you can use checkbox drop-down fields, always try to go for that option. It's a typical thing that we run into where we'll easily find 10, 15 properties that we say, hey, this can be replaced by a simple drop-down where we have a set number of values, which we can add to, of course, but making it so that every property value is one of those set values, making it just so much easier to report. So something to take into consideration when you're going through your existing properties, saying like, hey, which one of these could be reverted back to a drop-down multi-select radio select type of property. Yeah.
Thanks, Martin, for that. And let's jump into our next feature that HubSpot offers. So those will be lists. So what are lists? So probably you're using them, but you're maybe curious, like what's the difference, when to use which type of the list. So in essence, we want to define lists that their way to segment contents, meaning constituents, donors, volunteers, anybody interacting with your organization based on shared characteristics, behaviors, or even properties. There are a couple of types of lists, static and active. So static lists are like snapshots. They're good for event RSVPs or maybe feeding into building a simple report. Active lists are better for ongoing outreach. They update automatically based on the filters you set in your HubSpot account. But I would like to add here something else. I would like to add here views because I see a lot of people using lists when they can be maybe using views. Views help your team stay organized. And this is like a pro tip when you want to help your internal teams. So they help your team stay organized without creating tons of new lists. As Martin mentioned, everything that you're creating duplicates for internal, external can be really quickly messy. So use views for day-to-day filtering, like all volunteers in New York, the donors that we are engaging this quarter. We will focus today on building active lists because those are the ones that are most scalable for nonprofit use. So with that, here is when to use them. But I would like to ask Martin, what is what are lists for nonprofits, especially how you see them using it? What's the things that they need to take into the account, and what are some benefits for nonprofits using this feature inside HubSpot?
Yeah. So for lists, and we'll recap this at the end as well, when we should think of segmentation in terms of lists and properties, et cetera. But for lists, three main use cases really, where it always comes back down to is targeted communication. So this is where you're setting up your lists based on filters or the static lists, like Stjepan mentioned, of event attendees, et cetera, to create a very specific niche target audience for any kind of specific messaging that you're doing. So in any kind of outreach that you're planning, whether it's an email outreach, text outreach, or perhaps you're setting up a marketing campaign, you're putting your audience together. This is where you'd use these lists, and you can use multiple ones to essentially build your list using inclusion lists, as you would say. Who do I need to include? And perhaps equally as important, who do I exclude, right? And so this is where once you've generated your initial lists and segments and they reflect the different segments within your organization, puzzling these together to form target audiences for specific campaigns, specific outreach, that's a first big use case of lists in general. What that translates to, I would say, right, is efficient donor management. We could kind of broaden the scope and just say efficient or a more efficient user journey, right? Where you're able to, by segmenting people in these different lists, you're able to then surface the right information to them based on whichever lists they belong to. I think that's a relative no-brainer in that sense, is that you create these lists and you can then use them to surface information specific to the people within that list. So effectively segmenting your contact base using these lists, typical use case. Where that then translates into, and that's really more, I would say, than the fun part, or where you really see the results of that, is your enhanced contact communication in general. We say enhance fundraising efforts, obviously depending on what your organization's goals are. The idea here is that you're able to surface the right information to people depending on which lists they're member of. So a couple of lists we'll typically put together are people who have attended an event. That's pretty straightforward. We want follow-up communication to anyone who's attended an event, but perhaps people who signed up but then didn't show. That'll be your no-show list. We'll want a separate set of communication there as well. Now, within that list, there might then be another list you use to overlap saying, okay, who attended the event and is a recurring donor, let's say. All right, that would be a separate communication together. And so using all of that, you puzzle together your audiences, your communication can be a lot more targeted, right? And your general call to actions, whether that's fundraising or any other goal, will just become a lot more efficient. We'll put in, again, I keep saying this, but at the end, we'll put in an example of how this all fits together. But that would be the general usage of lists. It's a lot of puzzling things together. It should reflect different segments in your organization, but make sure to use multiple lists and combine them to create as niche target audiences as are relevant for you. Similar tip to when it comes to the setting up of properties, lists can get very messy as well. So having regular list audits is a must do, I would say, at least quarterly, where you can go into the list that you have set up in HubSpot, use a lot of the features that are there, which show you exactly which lists are in use, right? Which lists have actively been updated, which lists have not been used in any kind of automation for the last 3-4 months. Review those and remove them, right? Because otherwise things can build up, and it wouldn't be, we've seen multiple HubSpot portals where 1,000 plus lists is not an exception, and that's what you want to prevent. So doing regular list audits, definitely recommended.
Those are all great tips, Maarten. And while we're heading to our next slide, life cycle stages, I would like to quickly pause here and ask everybody attending here, put in the chat pane, are you using life cycle stages in your HubSpot portals? How are you using them? And do you even know what they are? So put in the chat pane, are you using life cycle stages? Yes, no. And if you are using them, you can write how, and we can or you have questions regarding lifecycle stages. So while you're doing that, I would say probably you log into your HubSpot account and you saw lifecycle stages, you saw MQLs, SQLs, SALs, opportunity, customer, and probably you stopped and wondered, this all sounds very salesy, not non-profit, not something that we do. So great news is that you can customize that fully to what you need. So I'll give you a couple of examples how to think about the life cycle stages. And after that, Martin will dive into more of like why you need to use them and what are some use cases that we are seeing. So for example, if you see a lead in your portal, you can think about new sign up. So a contact who has signed up to receive communication from your organization. That can be a newsletter, a blog update. If you see an MQL, that can maybe be in your portal an engaged supporter, somebody that is engaging, somebody that wants to be a part of your organization. If you see an SQL, sales qualified lead, probably that doesn't say much in your terms, but you can rename it for example and name it likely donor, somebody that is just like one or two more touches in their journey to donate, to be to do some monetary transaction with your organization. And then a customer can be a donor, and then those are all like just basic examples, but some of the benefits is that lifecycle stages in HubSpot can be adapted to fit the unique engagement journey of your audiences. And I would like to deep dive more, because maybe you have donor journey, maybe you have volunteers, maybe you have grants. So those can also add to that lifecycle stages using additional statuses. That can be a status that indicates if somebody expressed interest. If they want, for example, volunteers They are maybe likely volunteers, but did they complete the orientation? Are they volunteering regularly? Do they want to become a volunteer leader? Those are all the things that you can use when you properly set up your life cycle stages. But over to Maarten to say more about some benefits and why we think that life cycle stages are very
Yeah.
important to use.
Yeah. And by the way, so I noticed also in the chat, most people, actually almost everyone, saying they're not actively yet using these life cycle stages, and that's very common. At least we see this with a lot of our nonprofit clients as well. I think a large reason for that is when you look at life cycle stages, almost by default in any CRM, really, this is a very for-profit focused SQL, MQLs, conversions, right? Where the end goal is a customer, right? Whereas how does that actually translate to nonprofits where the journey is quite different? And so this is where what Stjepan mentioned when it comes to customizing these stages is very important. Not many nonprofits that we work with use the MQL, SQL customer stages. I can't really think of any, but there are almost all of them do use lifecycle stages. And the way to think of that is when should I think in terms of life cycle stages versus lists and segments that I set up? Life cycle stages really is more of a chronological journey, right? So whatever that looks like for your organization, whether that it's getting new supporters signed up, collecting donations to potentially convert them into ambassadors or leaders for your organization, that could be a life cycle stage progression that you'd want reflected. This is one that you can't really that we've noticed you can't really copy paste across, especially nonprofit organizations, just because it does look so different. And more often than not, there are more than one journeys, right? So you would have a life cycle stage journey for grants. You would have a life cycle stages for donations, for supporters, for campaign activists, whatever that may be. So you can have multiple pipelines, so to speak, of people moving through these different stages. So I think the most important there to keep in mind is life cycle stages that should reflect a chronological order. Like what is a journey that your supporters or the context that you're working with are on, and what would an end goal look like? Now, this doesn't have to be like a for-profit conversion, an end goal, right? But what does that chronological journey look like? And so when you do have that set up, what it can help you with is what's mentioned there, understanding the supporter behavior. So how are people moving through that journey? How am I getting new supporters to become ambassadors for my organization? And where is that potentially breaking down? Where are people falling off? Where am I not getting people to that next stage? That's where setting up these life cycle stages will help you understand that. Improving experience in the sense that similar to the lists and segments that we have set up, someone who's in an earlier stage of their journey versus someone who's in the later stage of their journey, whatever that journey may be, you'll talk to them differently, right? So this would be a very go-to segmentation that you'd use for any kind of outreach, where we would reach out to people in the earlier stages much differently than we would with people in the later stages. So it just kind of helps segmenting there as well. And then it also just ties into, again, the general communication, fundraising, being more effective, because you're able to not only see where they're at in their journey, but then also react to that and send out the right message at the right time, because you understand where in the journey they're at. Important use cases or important notes there. Stjepan already mentioned it, but customize the life cycle stages. Very unlikely that the default stages in any CRM are going to be relevant for your organization. So think through what those stages would be. Don't overdo it, and just categorize. I would say, rule of thumb, 5 stages is generally more than enough of different stages of a journey that users can be in. Once you do have those then defined, using workflows and automations to move people through automatically, that's a big feature of HubSpot, but of any CRM really, where it's what are the criteria for someone to move from a new supporter to being a active donor? Would that be X amount of donations made? Would that be X amount of months as being part of your organization? Whatever that automation is, set that up in a workflow so that your contacts are moving through automatically. Again, we're collecting all this information in our properties. There are sign-up dates, there are forms that they're submitting, petitions they're signing, donations they're making. So using those properties to automate the stages that they go in is a big benefit of having these stages set up in the first place. And then, so yeah, finishing that off with that pro tip, I kind of mentioned it before. Don't overdo it. I feel like the two use cases we run into the most is it's not set up at all because there's not really a clear journey, so we're not really using lifecycle stages. The other is the complete opposite, where we'll have a pipeline and where there's 18 different lifecycle stages, right? Where they're overly categorizing every single step in a journey. That's not great either. Usually that's going to fall apart at some point where people are going to be moving back and forth in their journey, and that's not really the point. You'd want this to reflect really more of a moving towards an end goal journey. So don't overdo it. Rule of thumb, 5, 6 stages is generally more than enough, but highly customize this to your organization, and don't rely too much on default lifecycle stages, I would say. So yeah, back to you, Stjepan, but that's on lifecycle. I think it's an important one to note, especially also given that I see a lot of people commenting that they're not actively using this yet. So good one to focus in on.
Yeah, that's why we are here. We want to support you and we want to provide you our thinking and what we are seeing and the benefits of the tools that you will have probably at any tier at disposal when you use HubSpot. And next up are tags. So before we start with tags, let me know in the chat pane, do you know what tags are in HubSpot? Just simple yes or no, and we can then talk more about it. So I just want to see how many of you are using tags, know what tags are, even if you're not using them, or you're not using them. So tags are something that I would like to think are the most underrated features in HubSpot. And tags are basically labels that, when added to deals in donations, provide valuable visual context to understand statuses within your pipelines. And you, as an organization, as a nonprofit, you can use them to bring clarity, context, and coordinations into your pipeline or multiple pipelines. So you can, if you think about it, you can have a pipeline for your donors, for your grants, for sponsorships, volunteers, for your leaders that are a part of the community you're being active. So those tags can apply to individual deals, donations, and think of them as sticky notes that say, hey, this one is important because. And as you can see here in the slide, we just made one that's saying first time donor. Maarten will talk more about why we think this is a pretty great feature inside HubSpot. But what's great is that tags are visible directly on the board view. So your team, your internal team, if they're separated in a couple of departments, if they're like one or two, they can quickly scan and identify priority without digging into the record, without opening 5 or 3 records, going through all the properties and trying to identify what they need to prioritize. And I always would like to recommend to create a shared tag library, SOP, to keep tag usage consistent. So otherwise, you will end up with various variations like recurring and recurring donor. And those can be floated around and people don't know why to use them and how. Finally, this isn't just for internal visibility. You can use also those tags for filters in reporting, even workflows, and even task prioritization. So you can, for example, trigger a Slack alert for any deal that's tagged with high value donor or VIP, or somebody that's always engaged on your events when this hits the specific stage. So over to you, Maarten. What are some benefits for nonprofits using it, and what are some use cases that you're seeing?
Yeah, yeah, and I think nail on the head there, obviously, Stefan. So the tags, different from perhaps lists and lifecycle stages and definitely properties, is that they're not necessarily bringing new information or collecting new information. It's more of a sticky note, visual aid, something that you'd want to call out to increase efficiency. So I think in the example there, when you're looking at a donation pipeline, for example, and there are certain actions that need to be taken. Let's say you have a team that's calling up potential new donations, qualifying them, and taking the next steps. what for them would be important when they're looking at all the donations coming in to prioritize one over the other, whatever that may be. Maybe that's a specific region, and maybe that's whether it's a recurring or a first-time donor, whatever those things are that they would want to just have a look at a glance, be able to prioritize their work and be more efficient in what they're doing. That's where these tags really come into place. And so again, this is not showing or building any kind of new information. And if you go on any contact or deal record, you would find it there as well. It's really more about surfacing what is already there in the right places. So in a pipeline, in a view, showing and highlighting the information that's relevant. So what that all helps do is essentially what I just said, going to a pipeline and assessing what you want to prioritize. So improve efficiency and improve organization, enhance relationships in the sense that if you're able to use these tags efficiently and get the right people to reach out to contacts in your database, depending on what these tags are highlighting, it'll just be a bit more streamlined as to who's owning the relationship here and where. So all of that just to say that it's a general efficiency catalyst and helps organizations without necessarily providing anything new. I would never rely on tags as a source of truth for information. It's more of a visual aid to help boost efficiency. And some of the use cases there, tags that we typically set up is donor activity, the one we showed, first time recurring donor. Again, this would be set based on how many donations are associated to this contact. And then we would have that tagged in there. General engagement, when is the last time someone attended an event or replied to an email or engaged with a form, right? If that's a relevant tag, we'd add that as well. Fund allocations, grant management, where are these coming from? What are the different sources? If that's relevant for you to assess sort of at first glance, those are the typical tags that we'd add. So again, wide variety of use cases there. General gist of it is visual aid to improve efficiency. What do you need to see when you're looking at your donations, your deals, your contacts, whatever it may be? That's what you want to use your tags for.
Okay.
So, go ahead, Stjepan.
Thanks, Maarten. I think you can do a brief summary, but before you do that, I just want to say, if you still have any questions, put it in the Q&A section. And I know we covered a lot, but did we? If you think about it, we only covered 4 features or tools, however you want to call it, that your HubSpot instance offers in a big tool belt you have access to. So I will now leave Maarten to summarize what we covered, and then he will do a demo when applying all these 4 correctly, how you can improve your HubSpot drastically, while at the same time saving a lot of time for your team and yourself. And then at the very end, you can make a big impact. So Maarten, take it
Yeah.
away. I will just stop sharing right now.
Yeah, or let me pull that up here. Okay. So real quick, just before we jump into the demo, quick summary of what we went through. Custom properties, what are those? Are essentially the building blocks that you're using, right? So this is where you want to be smart. Where should each property live? Is this a contact data point? Is this a company data point, a household data point? Setting all of these up is probably what takes the most work, I would say, but these are going to be your building blocks for everything else, essentially. Lists are then more the defined groups, right? Where you're using these properties to apply filters, put lists together, which in and of themselves become sort of building blocks for putting audiences together, right? Life cycle stages, that's really where you want to look at what is more of a journey and more of a chronological journey that my users are on, and what are the different stages in that to reflect it. And then the tags, as we mentioned, those are really more the visual markers, right? They surface that information that is relevant to specific deals, contacts at a specific time for specific folks. So with that summary, let's go through some examples. And let's see this all in action. So I'm in a HubSpot portal here, and now for context, and I'm just going to go over this real quick, but just for the sake of the demo, I'm an organization, I'm a nonprofit, I run several campaigns that folks can make donations towards for a variety of causes. I'm not going to go through into the entire journey mapping. We'll probably have more deep dive sessions on this. One thing I just want to call out, because we'll reflect this in the demo, is one thing I'm setting up is when new contacts come in and they make a donation, based on their donation amount, I'm putting them in a certain tier, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. If they have more than $100 in donations, they would be upgraded to tier 2, more than 1,000 be tier 1. So I have my initial mapping. This is my organization. Jumping into the portal here, we have a household object that we created. In this household, we have multiple contacts associated, Kate and Murphy here. I can already see some data here living purely on the household object. I can see that there's an annual giving level of this household that is an aggregated property that's taking different donation amounts from people associated to the household and showing it here. And other than that, I can see the individual contacts associated to it. So Kate and Roy. I'm going to open up Roy as an example here to go into some of these properties and building blocks that we have set up. So as I mentioned, in this organization, I'm collecting donations for a variety of campaigns. And what I can see here already is Roy has made a total of $75 in donations. His average donation amount is $75. He's made one donation. This is the campaign that he's donated to, the Climate Justice Action Campaign. I can also see that that is the last campaign that he has donated to. And all of that puts him currently in a tier 3 donor stage, right? Added a few additional insights here just to basically show more of a timeline view of when his donations came in. But this is what's living on a contact level, right? And these are the different types of properties that we've set up to collect that data. Now, what would happen if a new donation comes in? So let's say Roy is making a donation to the Youth Education Fund. I'm doing this through a HubSpot form, but there's different ways that and different tools that you can integrate to collect your donations and pass this to HubSpot. For the sake of a demo, doing this through a HubSpot form. Roy donating to their Youth Education Fund, $200, submit. Okay. If I now go back to Roy, I'm going to give this a second because HubSpot is quick, but sometimes not super quick. We'll refresh this. And we'll refresh this one more time. Okay, third time's a charm. Okay, it's starting. There you go. I'm going to give it one more second for the last properties to fill in. Okay, there we go. So you will see a lot has changed already, and this is all automated in that his total donations, that's a calculated property. That's taking the individual donations that Roy's made and counting them all up. So that's reflected here. The average donation, also a calculated property, updated here. We have two automated properties here, which is what are the campaigns that Roy's donated to? It used to be only the Climate Justice Action campaign. Now it's also the Youth Education campaign. The last campaign that he donated to is now set to the Youth Education Fund, right? All of this is done through calculated properties and properties that are set through workflows, right? So, oh, sorry, here we go. And here we see the two donations separate. So I see his initial donation of 75 and his secondary donation here of $200. All of this has now also upgraded his life cycle stage to what we would consider a tier 2 donor, right? If I now also go and have a look at, and kind of tying this all together, and you'll see in the reason why we do all this, if I look at my list that I've put together here of, hey, everyone who's donated to the Youth Education Fund, give us a quick refresh. Roy is now part of this list as well because he's just made his donation. Now, why is that relevant? We'll see that in a bit. So if I now go back to the Murphy household, a couple of things have changed. I see now, hey, there's two people in this household. One's a tier 2 donor, one's a tier 3 donor. If I go to my donation pipeline, however I may have set this up, I see that Kate's donation that came in last year is from what we consider a first-time donor. Roy is now considered a recurring donor because he's made 2 donations already. So that tag has been updated as well. Now, how does this all, so this is all great. We have all this information. Now, if I'm reaching out to Roy, I can go on to his contact record and see all this and tailor the way I communicate with him. But, and this is where it gets very cool, is we can automate a lot of this as well. Or rather, I should say, the mass communications that we want to do to our constituents in this situation can be tailored using all of these different data points that we have. So I'm taking an example of a newsletter email that we'd want to send out from this organization. You can see there's some generic copy in here. Hey, what we've achieved, thanks to your donations, a call to action, an image, another piece of copy here. But you might notice here these little smart module tags there. What that means is that each section of this email has been set up in a way that it'll show different to different people depending on two things, one being list membership in this case, and one being lifecycle stage. So if I go here, I see that this top section, I've made 3 versions, one for tier 1, tier 2, and one for tier 3 donors. I can go in and edit these and say, okay, for tier 1 donors, I want to show this. For tier 2 donors, I want to see this. I've done this with the entirety of the email. So the call to action will look different depending on their tier, but this section will look different based on not their life cycle stage, but list membership in this case. So if they're part of the youth education list, people who've donated to this campaign, I will show something else than people who've donated to the clean water campaign. So if I look at how this would now look, and I want to send this exact email out, we can have a look at what Kate would receive. So Kate's email would look something like this. She's a tier 3 donor. We have a CTA here that says, hey, with an additional donation of $20, you'll be upgraded to a tier 2 donor with these benefits. And then there's a call to action to explore active campaigns. And then we have a summary of the last campaign she donated to, being the climate justice campaign. If I now look at this exact same email, and again, this is the exact same email that would go out to Roy, this would look very different for Roy. If Roy would say, hey, as a tier 2 member, we invite you to join our quarterly online briefings. His CTA will be RSVP to this quarterly briefing. In this case, they both donated to the climate justice campaign, so they would see the same section here. But it shows how not just collecting all these properties is great, adding into this list is great, and it gives us a lot of information when we're digging into individuals. What it adds to it is any kind of communication, landing pages, blogs that I write can fully be set up with smart content, smart rules to show different bits of information based on the lists they're in, the life cycle stages they're in, the calculated properties that we've collected. And so all of that to kind of summarize what the initial goal essentially was, right, of why we're doing this, the segmenting in the first place, is to get the right message, to talk to people in the right way, right? And to assess where they are in their journey and making sure that our communication reflects that. So this is just a demo example, tying it all together, using properties, using life cycle stages, using lists, and in this case, using smart copy to take all of that and adjust our messaging based on what we know about them. And again, this is where you make your CRM work for you and not the other way around. So with all of that said, I'm going to jump back in here. Okay. Stjepan, do you want to close us off? So did we?
Yeah, thanks, Maarten.
Oh,
This has been amazing. I was muted myself because I was like looking at everything that you are showing and how everything ties together, and it's so great to see it in action. Let us know in the chat or in Q&A. Do you have any questions regarding how to set up smart content? Connect on us with LinkedIn. And as mentioned, for you who stayed by the very end, we have a more how-to guide with practical tips on setting up some of these segments, workflows, properties. You can just scan this QR code and get our HubSpot guide to nurturing donor relationship that our sister brand nonprofit tech shop we created for you. And let us know when you start building. Over to you, Maarten.
Yeah, guys, if you scan a QR code, so it's a more practical guide that we've put together. It goes a little bit more in depth into some of the things we showed in the demo, setting up these properties, setting up these lists. It's a little bit more of the behind the scenes of actually setting up these properties to do that calculation and to do these automations for you. So yeah, have a look at it. I think it'll help clarify a little bit how the building of it all goes. Last thing I would just call out is, so first of all, thank you all for joining. This was great. This is obviously the first non-profit hug event. We're gonna have much more of these. We want to start with more of a general idea of, hey, this is how, general segmentation in your CRM can work for you. If you have specific topics, specific IDs that you'd want to focus on, please reach out, right? We really want to make this more of a community feel, so that in our next sessions, the idea would be to go a bit more in depth and to have a bit more deep dive sessions into particular topics. So please do reach out, connect, send us over IDs. Yeah, we'd be happy to have a look at it. Yeah, looking forward to putting together what our next session is going to be about.
Thank you. So I was looking at the Q&A section and I don't see any questions. So that means that we did a great job, or people were using some of those tools and don't have any questions. But let us know. We still have 8 minutes left where we can talk about what are you currently doing in your HubSpot instance, what help do you need, is there any maybe tool that we didn't cover here and you are hub curious more about, let us know. We will stay here for a couple more minutes, but if there are no questions, then we can probably wrap it up. And once again, thanks everybody for participating and being here with us. So okay, so
But I think there was,
if you
yeah, sorry, I
cannot
think there was
find,
one
yeah,
question in the chat. Keegan, maybe you can expand on that a little bit. So how donations can help on marketing campaigns? Is that if that was a general question, maybe just and feel free to elaborate a little bit, but in terms of how those two can be connected, and let me know if this is your use case or not. When donations come in, like in the example that we had Roy, Kate being in different types of donor tiers, right? They would also be added to different lists. And for example, if I'm setting up a marketing campaign to turn one-time donors into recurring donors, Kate would be part of that list, would be part of my target audience, right? I'd have my marketing messaging be tailored towards, hey, you took the first step, you made some amazing impact with, these are the results of your donation. These are other campaigns that you could contribute to that might be relevant or that might interest you. And this is where I would use not only her donation history, that's one thing, but also topics of interest that I've captured. What has Kate been interacting with? What has she been reading? What has she not been reading? Based on that, I would add her to a specific marketing audience and tailor my message to say like, hey, and basically send her or message her with the topics that are interesting for her. So that's really where how that would all tie together. But obviously, this is very specific per campaign you set up. But the general idea of using these lists, I think when it comes to marketing and setting up your marketing audiences, lists are really your go-to, where you're puzzling together your target audience based on the metrics that matter there. Will we get this recording, Wanda? Yes. If I'm not mistaken, it gets sent automatically. Otherwise, we are sending this out on our end as well. Yep. Cool.
okay, great. So there's no, I'm not seeing any more questions, but if you do have them and you cannot find the Q&A section, put it in the chat here and we will try to answer it. And just a quick reminder, if you don't have any questions now, but you will maybe have it like in a week or two, or you're doing something in your HubSpot instance and you're thinking about it, but you're not sure, you have our LinkedIn URLs. Please connect with us. As I mentioned in the beginning, for those who maybe didn't jump early, we will be active in the nonprofit community of HubSpot. We also plan to be more active and staying active in the Reddit channels for nonprofits, and share your topics. We plan to make this as a community to share any pain points, any wins, any potholes that we can all figure out, because we do want for you to make an impact using the portal, the HubSpot that you already have. So join our group, as Angela said. You can join the Nonprofit Hub. Please do share on your social channels if you see fit. We want to make this available for everybody to join. And as big as we make it, we will make the bigger impact. So, Martin, any last words, and we can probably wrap this first event.
That's it. Looking forward to the next one. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a great day.